Coming to you from the Hudson Media Group studios, this is Talking Politics, and I am the professor, Fernando Uribe. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get started. This is what I'm thinking about right now. Folks, it is December, and of course, it's time for SantaCon, and while New York City will be having it soon, in addition to other cities across the United States, the local one in Hoboken took place recently. Now, let me give you some details here to sort of unpackage a little bit of what I'm going to be referring to throughout this opening monologue. Now, there were only 8 arrests, which were down from 14 in 2018. Now, charges ranged from aggravated assault on an officer to DWI to possession of controlled substances. Now, one arrestee, though, was a Hoboken resident. And that shouldn't surprise anybody, since SantaCon becomes a very popular tourist destination during the month of December, and thousands of people converge upon the Mile Square City for this annual tradition. In addition, Hoboken Volunteer Ambulance Corps reported that 20 individuals were transported to nearby hospitals for issues stemming from intoxication. In addition, Hoboken Police responded to 521 calls for service, nearly 100 more than 2018. They handed out 49 ordinances and 49 moving violations. Expanded patrols and assistance from neighboring police departments for the day reportedly will be costing approximately $75,000. As a matter of fact, Hoboken Police Chief Ken Ferrante took to Twitter to offer his support of everyone who helped out throughout the day. He said, I quote, "I want to thank everyone and every Hoboken police officer who worked yesterday and professionally kept the day under control and helped avoid any major incident where someone was severely injured, which is our ultimate goal on these con event days." To no one's surprise, right after Police Chief Ferrante's Twitter feed went viral, Hoboken Mayor Ravi Bala also took to Twitter to offer his 2 cents on the matter. He said, quote, "I just addressed Hoboken PD at roll call to express my gratitude for serving today and did a drive around the city to assess conditions. Thank you also to the Union City Police Department and all the bars who did not participate in the event. Stay safe, and big thank you to Chief Ken Ferrante and all the first responders." Once again, folks, cheers to everybody who helped make it a safe success. Unfortunately, there were some individuals who took to social media to bitch and moan about the bar crawl, along with Leprechaun in March, which amounts to 2. Yes, folks, only 2 bar crawls in a calendar year. Now listen, I get it. You live in downtown Hoboken and you pay an exorbitant amount of money for rent. Now, we're all happy for you that you can afford this. But guess what? You live in downtown Hoboken. And I'll say it again. When you choose to live in a downtown section of any city, now again, you're entitled to some peace and quiet, and I'm sure you want some serenity. But understand whether you live in downtown Hoboken or downtown Jersey City or any downtown city in the United States, the chances of foot traffic, especially during these type of bar crawls, is inevitable. Now again, I've made the same statement when I've interviewed Jersey City Wardy Councilman James Solomon concerning his issues with Pedestrian Plaza in downtown Jersey City. And of course, even during the podcast and even during commentary throughout this year, I've made it very apparent to all my listeners. Folks, I get it. We're all entitled to some sort of, tranquility in our lives. But when you make the decision to live in a downtown section, especially like Hoboken, what do you expect? And again, folks, if this was happening every single week, I would understand for you to be outraged. But I was sort of horrified, and even looking at, for example, at HMag, which is a very reputable online magazine in Hoboken, which again, you can check out at www.hmag.com. But I was sort of horrified at the amount of grown-ass men and women bitching and moaning about these bar crawls. There were some film crews that were going to be taping some of the festivities and walking around talking to patrons and also sort of observing what goes on during SantaCon. This is no surprise. It happens in every city. But to hear some of the vitriol from residents about these bar crawls, listen, I understand you don't want to look at people walking around intoxicated. You don't want to see people walking around maybe half naked with Santa outfits. I understand all that. But folks, it's 2 bar crawls out of the year. It's one in December for SantaCon, and it's one in March for Leprechaun that people observe during the St. Patrick's holiday season. But you know what? When I hear residents sort of complaining online and saying they don't want to be filmed or they can't be able to walk their dog on this day, let me tell you something. I don't own a pet, and I don't mind being filmed, but a lot of residents don't care. If it bothers you that much, do me a favor. You can do errands. You can go Christmas shopping. Guess what? Jump on the path. Go down to Rockefeller Plaza. Check out the tree. I don't know, walk your dog somewhere else. It's one day out of the winter season that you're slightly inconvenienced. Oh my God, boo effing who, as far as I'm concerned. And it was interesting to me whenever I comment on HMAG's social media or any other sort of local publication about SantaCon, I get sort of attacked. Well, you don't live here, Fernando, and you know what? You have no right to talk. Well, let me tell you something. I used to work in hospitality and in nightlife. That's what paid my bills during my years in graduate school. And I understand it's an inconvenience, but it's 2 bar crawls during an entire calendar year. And you know what? Those are jobs that help boost the local economy in Hoboken. You don't want to deal with SantaCon, go to Uptown Hoboken. A lot of those bars and restaurants don't participate in them. All right? You want to have a meal, take out your loved one, go sightseeing, whatever it is. There's plenty of things to do in Uptown Hoboken. If it bothers you that much, stay away from the downtown section. All right? But when we hear grown-ass adults bitching and moaning on social media about how awful this is, listen, you want peace and tranquility? Move to Paramus or Parsippany, but don't move near the PATH train. And that's exactly what you've done. Now, again, I'm not trying to be insensitive to residents. Again, you pay a lot of money for your rent in downtown Hoboken or in downtown Jersey City. But folks, let's keep it in perspective. If it's happening every single weekend, that's one thing. But it isn't. It's happening 2 days a year. And as someone, again, who worked in hospitality and nightlife, you know what? These jobs help families, they help business owners, they boost payrolls, and you know what? They boost hospitality and tourism, whether you want to admit it or not. So again, folks, when I think about people taking to social media and airing their grievances about SantaCon, I'm going to say it once and for all and make sure that you get what I'm saying. Enough with your bitching and moaning. You are grown-ass men and women, okay? And complaining like you got stood up at your prom. Come on, suck it up. It's 2 days out of the year. It's not the end of the world. There are plenty of other things to do during SantaCon and Leprechaun, respectively. And if you can't find something to do, well, really, the problem isn't with me and everybody else. The problem's with you. And that's what I'm thinking about right now. During this week's edition of the 3-time award-winning podcast, Talking the Hudson, which you can listen to live every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/Talking the Hudson from any PC, Mac, smartphone, or tablet, was Insider NJ columnist and who I consider the dean of Hudson County journalism, Al Sullivan. Now, he was on with me for over 2 hours on the podcast, and we discussed some of the major stories that took place in 2019 in Hudson County. But tragically, the one story that seems to stand out is what happened in only the last 72 hours here in Hudson County. And it's a tragic shooting that took place on the south side of Jersey City. Now, I'll discuss some of the details going into what happened on that very tragic day in which a police officer lost his life and many others as well. But he sort of gave us a breakdown about sort of maybe the underlying issue here of the ongoing tension between the black community and the Jewish community on the south side of Jersey City. Let's hear what he had to say.
It's probably the biggest story of the year for all the wrong reasons, obviously. But if you just shed some light tonight on our listeners in terms of what new information's out there, what's been uncovered, like you have great sources. What have you heard about the last 24, 36 hours?
Well, I got scooped on my scoop because, essentially, this is what's happened. And I confirmed it with, unfortunately, the press conference with the governor and the attorney general today. And the New York Times, I got the question answered, and immediately the Post, the Times, and CNN hopped all over and grabbed it. Essentially, what happened is last Saturday, a guy and a woman beat up and killed a guy in Bayonne, an Uber driver. Apparently, they were politically connected somehow, and there was a manhunt. They apparently tried to steal his car. They threw him in the trunk. He was dead, but the car got a flat tire. This is all being reported in Tap-In story shortly. I think it may even be up by now. Okay.
Jesus.
At that point, they apparently had plotted to assassinate a yeshiva in Jersey City on Martin Luther King, and also shoot the people inside the grocery store, which serves the Hasidic community. The cops are saying they believe that the plot was actually very widespread, may involve more people, but that they had intended to kill hundreds. of kids.
Jesus.
Okay, that was where it appears to be headed. What happened is this cop, who was originally a Bayonne resident, as a detective who Seals, who was assigned to get guns off the street, apparently spotted, because there had been as of Saturday, there was a county-wide manhunt for these people, and they were following them on video. Okay,
Jesus.
And they even had the murder in Bayonne on video. They have it.
Jesus. Jesus.
Okay, the cops seized them on Garfield Avenue in the cemetery. Apparently, they were ready to. They either were looking for accomplices. They had a stolen U-Haul van. Apparently, they couldn't use the car that they stole because it got a flat tire in Bayonne. That's how the cops got that. The manhunt. He went after them, and they killed them in the graveyard. Shot him dead. At that point, a 911 call apparently alerted the police. These two, with a car full of high-powered weapons, including a pipe bomb, and the pipe bomb's verified. The Attorney General and others won't confirm that the van's full of guns, but the cops did, suggesting that there were more people possibly going to be involved in the attack. They drove over to the store, and the guy, Anderson, came out with a rifle and went in and shooting. And they were apparently going, and what the police believe is that they were going to start with the store and then go over to the yeshiva and start shooting. What happened is the 911 call about the cop, Seals, alerted the local police. When the report of gunfire at the store emerged, 2 patrol cops were walking. They ran over and kept the suspects in the store so they couldn't come out and couldn't go to this yeshiva. The shootout occurred for over 2 hours, and eventually the suspects were killed. 2 police officers were wounded, 3 innocent victims, 1 clerk and 2 customers were killed. 1 customer apparently was wounded and managed to escape out before the massive shooting. There were hundreds of, at least 100 rounds shot. There were bullet holes when I was down there in the windows of the Catholic school across the street, and as well as through numerous vehicles. The Army, apparently the Army was in there. They eventually sent an armored vehicle through the front door after they sent a robot in there with eyes to see if the suspects were dead. And when they confirmed they were dead, they still sent this armored vehicle, smashed through the front window, and then they found the bodies. The investigation is going on. Police sources believe that there's more suspects to be had. Apparently, one of the suspects, Anderson, published a lot of anti-Semitic stuff on social media and also anti-cop stuff. And now there's a war between Fulop and the governor because Fulop wants them to declare, and this is the Insider NJ column, because I'm using both of them, to declare it a hate crime and a terrorist act, and the governor has not yet done so.
What? Okay, but what's the governor waiting for? I mean, again, I'm not a lawyer.
Fulop won't.
It's weird.
He wants to make sure the investigation, but there's a lot of okay, here's the problem, is we're in this national argument about anti-Semitism and the left. Well, this is two African Americans in an African American community that went after the Jewish people. Okay, It's not the typical homegrown terrorism, and it feeds into this perception that the left is anti-Semitic. And at this point, that's politically incorrect.
Well,
Okay,
I mean,
so there's this delay in if this were a white supremacist group, it would already have been declared.
oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Once again, it was an insightful episode with Al Sullivan, which, as a matter of fact, was over 2 hours long. And you can listen to it in its entirety by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/Talking the Hudson. In addition to this very tragic story, we summarized some of the biggest stories in Hudson County, which included the defeat of Airbnb in Jersey City, the re-election of Councilman Mike DeFusco, as well as Councilman Mike Russo in Hoboken, and what their big numbers on Election Day mean moving forward as they perhaps will seek the office of mayor in 2021. We also talked about sort of the status of Robbie Bala as mayor of Hoboken and whether or not his political capital seemed to sort of maybe take a downturn during the recent election cycle. In addition, we also talked about the recent mayoral election in West New York during the spring and the win by the New Beginnings ticket led by Gabriel Rodriguez and his board of commissioners in ultimately defeating two-time incumbent Mayor Felix Roque. We discussed a lot about what happened in 2019 and also a little bit about the national political climate. So you certainly want to tune into it, again, in its entirety by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/Talking the Hudson. Now to some local stories. And again, sort of continuing with the tragic events in Jersey City, Mayor Stephen Fulop held various press conferences throughout the last 72 hours to discuss what the events meant, and to be very honest, he went out and clearly called it a hate crime. Now, unfortunately, New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy and his Attorney General, Gurbir Grewal, have yet to sort of make the same proclamation. But without a doubt, Stephen Fulop vehemently disagrees. Now, again, shout out to my fellow journalist, John Hines with the Hudson County View for breaking the story. And even though state and federal authorities have said it's too early to determine the motive for why two shooters, two black residents, one male and one female, opened fire on a kosher market in Jersey City. Now, again, Mayor Stephen Fulop even doubled down on his belief that it was a clear example of a hate crime. Now, let me just give you some details here to sort of unravel what's happened in the last 48 hours. Mayor Fulop went on to say, quote, "Others may have incomplete or inaccurate information, which can not only cause unnecessary panic in the community, but also undermine the integrity of an ongoing criminal investigation." Now, that's what Attorney General Gurbir Grewal mentioned, which included, again, Governor Murphy and also U.S. Attorney Craig Carpenito. Fulop, though, did not attend the aforementioned media event with the Attorney General and the Governor, but he remained adamant and defiant that the rampage that took place on the south side of Jersey City recently was specifically directed at the city's Jewish community. And let's be very honest, folks, it's hard to even deny that. We know that for some time, and despite some articles and some other journalism that's been written in recent years, there has been some ongoing tension between the black community and the Jewish community in that part of Jersey City. This is not speculation, this isn't slander, this isn't conjecture, this is fact. And anyone who's done their homework on the region in a specific area knows this to be true. Again, I discussed it during the podcast with Al Sullivan, and you can certainly look it up yourself. Folks, I'm not trying to make this up or fabricate something. This is something that's widely known. It's a growing tension that unfortunately blew over to a very tragic event this past week. Now, again, just to sort of continue on with what Mayor Fulop was saying, he said, quote, "There's no question that this was an attack on the Jewish community. There's no other way to interpret it." Now, he said at a press conference, which was located at 223 Martin Luther King Drive, which took very nearby the actual incident. Quote, "From our statement, there was no question that this was a hate crime. It was, and anti-Semitism should be called out immediately and aggressively for what it is." Now, listen, folks, as you know, if you've watched this program and even listened to my podcast, there aren't a lot of times I agree with Mayor Fulop, but this is one of them. Because you know what? He's right. This is a blatant hate crime. This is a outright demonstration of anti-Semitism. Now, again, as information is sort of filtering out, and I'm sure it will come out in the days and weeks ahead, we understand that the two attackers belong to a militant group. And listen, let's be very fair. They don't represent every single member of the black community. So I also want to be also adamant about that as well. But understand, folks, that, you know what, this could be sort of a microcosm of what's been going on in the area. Now, again, the details are still scarce, but I can tell you that at least from what we're learning, this is blatantly a hate crime. And it should be treated as such. And I'm hoping that the state and the federal government take the appropriate action to sort of address this and hopefully try to implement some measures. And no, it's not blatant gun control, as Governor Murphy has said in recent, media reports. And I get it. I understand that, no tragedy should ever be left, untouched, or you should never, let a good tragedy, go to waste. As we once know that Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel said that as he, worked in the White House during the early days of Barack Obama. But let's sort of not panic here. Let's not sort of cater to any sort of hysteria. Let's investigate this thoroughly. Let's come up with some provisions and let's come up with some measures that'll make sense. And let's do that. And we're hoping, again, that Attorney General Grewal, that Governor Murphy, and that Mayor Stephen Fulop can work together, because we don't want this happening. Again, from the details that have surfaced, a bigger disaster could have been averted by attacking a nearby school and other members of the Jewish community. Now, again, we don't know if this could have been prevented, what could have been done. We'll find out in the coming days and weeks. But without question, let's not jump to conclusions in terms of what the motives were for some of these individuals. We know it was hateful, it was malicious, and it was just an absolute, just despicable act. But at the same token, let's not sort of paint a broad brush and believe that everyone in the Black community feels this way about their Jewish neighbors, because that's just not the case. There's a lot of harmony in Jersey City, especially in the South Side. So we're hoping that this event can bring the community together and not drive it further apart. And another story that affects local residents, not just only Hudson County, but throughout the state of New Jersey, and here one that should be closing out 2019, is that the issue for legal weed continues at the State House. And we know that recently some hearings will begin before the end of the calendar year to address this problem and whether or not it'll be on a ballot question next November in 2020. Now, again, a shout out to Amanda Hoover with NJ.com for this update as it pertains to, there's going to be a fight to the end here in 2019 as to whether or not legal weed will become a reality in the Garden State. Here are some details here just to sort of unravel this a little bit. Now, we are sort of living through a process, ladies and gentlemen, that legislative committees will be discussing a ballot question to legalize marijuana in New Jersey during this lame duck session of the legislature. Now, opponents are pushing back, though, as they're calling on lawmakers to, quote, stop rushing the issue and to vote down the proposed question. Now, for example, members of New Jersey RAMP, which stands for Responsible Approaches to Marijuana Policy, and other anti-marijuana organizers gathered at the State House recently to ask lawmakers to pump the brakes when it comes to legalized marijuana. And the executive director of New Jersey RAMP, Stephen Reed, went on to say, quote, "We fought hard last year to make sure that this did not come to fruition. And this is just one way to skirt the system and to invite big business into New Jersey." Now, Assembly and State Senate committees will continue to hold hearings throughout the rest of the month of December here in 2019 on a proposed constitutional amendment that would legalize marijuana. Now, in order to get it on next November's election ballot, the amendment needs to win by a 3/5 majority in both chambers of the legislature or by a simple majority in votes this year and also in 2020. Now, that makes it likely that the amendment will get votes in both chambers sometime before the end of 2019. Now, folks, listen, I've talked about it before, and we know that there are sort of different forces here at play. For example, Governor Murphy made legalizing marijuana one of his campaign promises, but the fight has hit several roadblocks. Even a vote on legalization was pulled earlier this March because the state Senate did not have enough votes to pass it, and neither did the state Assembly. Now, while another effort has gained traction in recent weeks, for example, State Senate President Steve Sweeney announced late last month that he would not take the bill to the floor and instead would move it to the ballot for voters to decide in November of 2020. Now, those who spoke at the State House recently took issue with the brevity of the ballot question, which leaves out vital details on how various forms of marijuana would be indeed regulated. Well, folks, listen, and I've talked about this throughout 2019, and I'm sure I'll continue discussing it in 2020. Listen, we continue arresting people unnecessarily here in the Garden State. In 2019 alone, folks, there were over 14,000 marijuana-related offenses here for New Jerseyans, which really translates to one arrest every 31 minutes. This is unacceptable. And I've talked about it before. If outright legalization is a problem, and I get it, there's perhaps some sort of ideological divide and even a generational divide when it comes to marijuana legalization. But let's decriminalize it. And let's do that as soon as possible. The fact we keep incarcerating people, and specifically people of color, both black and brown, is absolutely unacceptable. As we all know, the data will tell you that white people smoke marijuana comparably at the same rate as their black and brown counterparts. But guess what? Black and brown people go to jail and they have longer sentences. And you know what? This is unacceptable. So whether or not we get decriminalization right, whether or not the legislature, both the state assembly and the state senate, can really, get off their asses and make this work remains to be seen. And I appreciate the fact that there are hearings and there are committees meeting. And you want to try to get this done. But as we all know, whenever you rush something, it tends not to be done properly. So again, I appreciate the diligency by the legislature, and I appreciate sort of the advocacy by groups, both pro-legalization groups and anti-legalization groups. But without a doubt, it's an issue we should all keep an eye out, because whether or not it gets legalized in 2019, or we have to wait until November of 2020 to see it on the ballot itself, remains to be seen. I don't know about you folks. Again, I don't smoke marijuana. I don't care to. I never have, and I never will. But I don't want to infringe upon your right to do so, and your right to do so without being incarcerated. Because as we all know, once you're incarcerated and you're involved in the criminal justice system, it's a never-ending cycle, and it's a cycle that most people tend to never, ever leave. So I'm hoping the legislature gets its right, at least by the end of 2019. If not, it should be the first thing they work on when the legislature gets back into session in 2020. Undoubtedly, residents will have a lot to say. People have taken to social media. Legislators will continue to hold press conferences and hearings, and everyone's going to have an opinion about it. But whether they like it or not, without a doubt, it should be addressed, and it should be addressed now. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for watching Talking Politics with Fernando Uribe throughout 2019. I can't say enough for all the support I've received online about the program, and I'll continue working hard for you in 2020. You can check out all the wonderful programming offered by the Hudson Media Group by going to www.hmgtvshows.com and also www.livestream.com/HMGTV. Now, the Hudson Media Group is also proud to partner with NJ On Air. You can check out all of their outstanding programming as well by going to www.njonair.com. Don't forget to like the Hudson Media Group and follow it on Instagram and Twitter. And as a matter of fact, don't forget to like NJ On Air on Facebook and also follow them on Instagram and Twitter as well. Don't forget the podcast, which you can listen to by going to www.blogtalkradio.com/Talking the Hudson, and you can do so from any PC, Mac, smartphone, or tablet. We've had wonderful guests in 2019, which have included Councilman Mike DeFusco, Mayor Ravi Bala, Assemblywoman Angelica Jimenez, Chief Prosecutor out of Jersey City, Jake Hudnut, as well as other very interesting guests throughout the year, and will continue to do so in 2020. In addition, folks, we'll be taking a break here in the Hudson Media Group, and we'll return with brand new episodes in the new year. In the meantime, I want to wish you all a very happy holiday season, a very Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Happy Festivus, regardless of whatever it is you celebrate. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season with your friends and family. And once again, thank you so much for supporting Talking Politics with Fernando Uribe. And never forget, if it's unbiased, unfiltered, and unafraid, you know it's always Talking Politics here with the Hudson Media Group. I'm Fernando Uribe. Thank you so much for watching.
Don't forget to catch Fernando's podcast at blogtalkradio.com/talkonthehudson. New episodes available every Wednesday night at 9 p.m.